Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you guys taking time out of your day. My name is Erica Fox. I'm a manager in Google University, and it's my great pleasure and honor to introduce my friend, Ngahihi Bidois, and affectionately known as Ngahi. Ngahi is an Indigenous Native Maori from New Zealand, and he's just published a book called Ancient Wisdom, Modern Solutions, about his quest to become a modern-day warrior. I met Ngahi in May in Kuala Lumpur. We were both speaking at a human resources conference where we were kind of sharing some innovative and best practice ideas around all sorts of human resources topics. And I heard Ngahi give a presentation and a speech about leadership, and particularly about what leadership means in the Maori culture. And I just thought it was something so interesting and that would resonate with Google, so I invited him here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ngahi.
He te atua no mai haramai. Haramai ki runga, haramai ki raro. Haramai ki te taha Māui, haramai ki te taha matau. Haramai ki roto, haramai ki waho. Haramai ki runga, haramai ki raro, no rere te atua. Ka nui te mihi ki a koe, tēnā koe. Ki a koutou hoki ngā anehera pai. Ngā mihi nui ake nei ki a koutou. Ki a koe, taku hoa, Erica, tēnā koe. Tēnā koe mo tō kāranga ki te hara mai I wainganui a koutou. Nā tō kāranga ka puta mai te whānau nei. Nō reira, ngā mihi nui ake nei ki a koe, tēnā koe. Ki a kōrua hoki, Karen, kōrua ko Mark, Julius, ngā mihi nui ki a kōrua, tēnā kōrua. A ki a koe, te kiwi, te tangata no Aotearoa ko Craig, ngā mihi nui ake nei ki a koe hoki. He pai ki te kite tō kānohi I wainganui a tātou, nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Just in case any of you have no idea what I just said, I brought along a dictionary, and the reality is if I gave you the dictionary, it wouldn't make any sense, and hopefully I'll be able to explain things a lot better in person, and of course I've written a book about it as well. But we have come from New Zealand. This is our first time here in New York, and it is a real privilege to be here. My name is Ngahihi o te rā Bidois, as Erica said. Ngahihi o te rā is Maori and means the rays of the sun. Bidois is French and means handsome, highly intelligent, and there was another one I keep forgetting. Oh, that's right, humble. And I still have not met a Bidois who disagrees with me. It's really good to be here in your beautiful city. And my wife and I, a few years ago now, were sitting in a lounge and watching TV. And as we were watching TV, we were crying because it was the 11th of September. And we have had the privilege of attending and going to a memorial while we've been here over in Wayne, the county of Wayne in New Jersey, with our hosts, with Karen and Mark, who are hosting us. And I remember standing in the middle of that memorial, and I was crying for the things that have happened in your beautiful nation. And for us to be here in the midst of New York, so many years later, to say to you, ngā mihi nui ake nei ki a koutou katoa, from our people, the Māori people, I give you our sympathy and our deepest wishes for those of you who I know may be still hurting. And in our culture, it is appropriate that we acknowledge those who have passed in your culture. And so I do that. Kia rātou, ngā hunga mate, haere, 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 haere atura. Nō reira, I greet you once, tēnā koutou. I greet you twice, tēnā koutou. I greet you 3 times, tēnā koutou katoa. I'm aware that there are 3 kinds of people in this audience today. First, obviously, visual learners, and we're going to fly through some PowerPoint presentations behind me to help you, because you learn by seeing and by reading. Audible listeners, will be telling a few stories along the way. And the final group of learners amongst you are obviously kinesthetic. So for the kinesthetic listeners, and this is just to prove that I met Erica in Singapore at the HRD Congress conference, and I must admit, Erica was just an outstanding ambassador for Google, not only on the stage, but off the stage as well. And she was one of the celebrity speakers of the engagement, and at times we felt more like bodyguards. And it was really nice to meet you there, Erica, and great to be here today as well. I would like to ask everyone to please stand for the kinesthetic learners. I had a friend who was dying, and it was the last time that I would meet him and see him on this earth. And in Māoridom, we call this an oha ki. And as I was talking to him, I said, you know, I'm finding it very difficult that you're going to be leaving, and I don't think I can survive. And he said to me, Ngahi, every answer that you will ever need in your life can be found if you look in the mirror. And if you ask the right questions of the person looking back at you, you will have the answer to every problem that you face. And what I'm going to do today is just encourage you to look into your mirror. And we're going to be looking at proverbs, people, and purpose. But I'm going to ask you questions, and I don't want to know the answer. But I want you to think about that question and think about the answer for yourself. Are you ready for your first question? Why am I standing? Ask yourself, why am I standing? What has happened? Many of you I have never met. In fact, I'd say I've only met half a dozen of you in this room. There are things that I have done to influence your behaviour. And as John C. Maxwell, one of your leadership gurus, says, the true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. And all we're going to do today is look at 3 ways to increase your influence. And as I said earlier, we're going to look at proverbs, people, and purpose, and the importance of those when it comes to influence. You may now be seated, unless you choose not to. And I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Google. I come from a group of people known as the Maori race in New Zealand. We are the Indigenous people of New Zealand. And not that long ago, Craig, in association with some people from my home city in Rotorua, developed Google in Māori. And that enabled my children, for example, who attend an education institute where their first language of instruction is Māori, to be able to get on their computers and Google in their Indigenous language. And for them to be able to do that has not only opened a whole new world for them from very young age, but it has given us as people what we call mana. It has given us prestige. It has given us a sense of belonging, because you made our language, which was also already an official language of New Zealand, more official. So I would like to take this opportunity as well to thank you at Google, because I know that you all would have had a part to play in it, for making it possible for us to Google in our official language. So we're going to look quickly at 3 ways to increase your influence. How many of you have been to prison? I actually don't expect you to answer that. I do see that hand down the back though. Oh, sorry, you're eating your... Yeah. I have. And it's about now Erica and the others think, uh-oh, that wasn't on the form. But the prison I went to was not a prison of concrete walls and steel bars. It was a prison of my mind. And this prison looked like this. When I was young, I saw a helicopter flying above and it had Santa Claus in it who was throwing us lollies. And I said to one of my mates as we were picking up these lollies, I'm going to fly on one of those one day. And they looked at me and said, yeah, right, Ngahi. A few too many lollies, I think. It goes like this. People in my life say, Ngahi, your life will never amount to anything. You go to university. I don't think so. You didn't even pass the national exams that we have. You write a book. You can't even write proper essays. You speak to people. Wasn't it that day that you skipped school or were very sick because there were speech contests on at school? I don't think so. So all of these bars, choof, 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 were being put around my mind. And people would say things like, you can't do that. You just can't do that. Choof, there's another bar. And it got to the stage that whenever I went to go and do something, all I could see was a bar in front of me, stopping me from achieving anything. Until an incredible thing happened in my life. I stayed with my grandmother for 2 years. And in those 2 years, in those 2 years, she taught me an incredible proverb. And that proverb was, Nā te whakaaro, ka puta mai te tangata. The thought creates the person. And she said this to me, Ngahi, it doesn't matter what other people think of you. What matters is what you think of you. And then she would give me a big hug and she'd say, and by the way, I think you can do anything. Nā te whakaaro, ka ora te tangata. There's another man who was a hero in my life, and his name was Bruce Lee. Have you heard of Bruce Lee? Yeah. Bruce Lee said this, as we think, so shall we become. In fact, if you'd have seen Bruce Lee, he would have said it like this, as we think, so shall we become. I think it was the dubbing of the movies. And if a man who was known for his physical prowess would say something like that and remind us that as we think, so shall we become, then how important is it for us to keep thinking as well? Leaders think, and thinkers lead. So for you as leaders, I would like to say this. I believe you are paid to think more than any other skill you have. And walking around your building, it was just so wonderful to see the many places where you can think. Opportunities that you have to think in this very building. Leonard Ravenhill said, opportunities of a lifetime must be seized in the lifetime of the opportunity. And you have so many opportunities here every day to think. Here's something for you to think about. Who are my eagles? Look in your mirror and say, who are my eagles? Who are my mentors? Who are the people who get me from A to B? Because you will be the same person in 5 years' time except for two things. One, the information that you learn. And two, the people that you meet. Let's take an example of that. Think of your 5 best friends. It is highly likely that your income is their average. So you want to earn more money? Dump your friends and get nanas. You want to be a better leader? Look to leaders that you want to be like and ask them to mentor you. Ask them to be your eagles. Eagle, as many of you will know, is an amazing bird. It has in its bone, in its wing, a bone that it locks. And it locks this wing as a storm approaches and can fly above storms. Eagles have been seen at over 15,000 feet by airline pilots. They fly so high that ice starts forming on their backs. And their wings are locked up here above the storm. And they are able to descend down the other side of the storm as well. And guess who the storm hits. Yep, all the turkeys. You guys have heard of that saying? How can I fly like an eagle when I'm surrounded by turkeys? Well, where are the eagles? They're up here. So when you are working those long hours, take note of who else is working with you. When you are doing those hard jobs that allow you to fly above the storm, take note of the other eagles who are flying above the storm with you. Go and meet them, get to know them. They will make you a better person. So, who are my eagles? Let's keep moving. Do I think like a leader is your next question. Remembering the things that I've seen around here and Google as well. You just think way outside of the box or the square or the circle or the star or whatever it is. And I encourage you and exhort you to continue to do that. Let's look at people. In our culture, people are very important. And this is a proverb which re-emphasizes that. He aha te mea nui I tēnei ao, he tāngata, he tāngata, he tāngata. What is the most important thing in this world? If you would ask me, what is the most important thing in this world? I would say to you, it is people. It is people. It is people. And on the 1st of March 2004, some very important people came and visited my home. It was the person who would put this tattoo, this Ta Moko, traditional Maori tattoo, onto my face. And he visited me in March, and I thought he was visiting me to talk about putting my Ta Moko on later in the year. And as we sat at our family dinner together with our 2 guests with us, he looked across at me after we had our main meal, and he said this, Ngahi, I have my gear in the car. Now remember, this had taken 8 years of planning and waiting. And I'm thinking, we're going to be doing this in October. It's now March. And he said, Ngahi, I have my gear in the car. We can do this tonight. Yes. Yes, I'm ready. I want to do this tonight. Suffice to say, I didn't get dessert that night. 8 o'clock at night until midnight. Midnight until 4 o'clock in the morning. One night, we got to midnight, and he said to me, we can take a break and you can do this another time. We can finish this another time if you want. And I said, no, I've waited 8 years for this, and I'm not leaving this house until it's done. And we finished the rest tonight. So 8 hours to put my tattoo onto my face. This part of my tattoo, my Ta Moko, emphasizes the importance of listening, which you are doing so well now. This part of my tattoo, my Ta Moko, emphasizes the importance of seeing and observing and looking. There is nothing on my forehead to emphasize the importance of thinking. And on my chin is a pattern that looks like a hammerhead shark. On my chin. And that is very significant to my tribe. The name of the tribe that I come to you from in New Zealand is called Te Arawa. And we are named after a shark. And when our canoe left our original place that we came from, it was caught in a whirlpool. And the priest of our canoe said a prayer which enabled us to come out of the whirlpool, and at the same time, a shark appeared. And this shark led us not only out of the whirlpool, but on to the resting place called Maketu in the Bay of Plenty of New Zealand, where our canoe rested. In fact, this event with the shark was so significant that when we left here, we were known as Ngati Oho Mairangi and changed our name to become known as the Te Arawa people after that shark. And we changed the name of our canoe as well to the Te Arawa canoe before travelling on. And so this shark, known as the Te Arawa shark, is on my chin because of the importance of speaking. And as I work with leaders around the world, we've just come from Singapore and England to be here today. What I emphasize is that leaders listen, look and observe and think before they speak. Talking about my Ta Moko, which one, and looking like a leader is very important. Which one looks more like a leader? One of them is taken like this, with the camera pointing at myself, and the other one is taken by a professional photographer. As leaders, we need to be careful where our image ends up because, as we all know, it can be on YouTube or anywhere within a split second. And beware of the roaming camera, especially at those social functions that we tend to attend. Be aware of our image as leaders. I was working in Cornwall and they gave me a silver Peugeot car to drive around in. And I was driving down the street, saw this sign, fresh scallops. Thought, yep, that's me. Pulled into a parking space, went to the shop, and the shop was closed. I thought, came out, got in my car, it was a brand new Peugeot they had given me, went to start the car and the car wouldn't start. And I thought, must be the alarm on the keys. Pulled the keys out, pushed the button, and the car in front of me went, "Gin." I remember looking at the key thinking, why would they give you keys for two cars? And then I thought, okay, let's try it again. Put it in, start, wouldn't start, put it out, push the button, car in front went, "Jet!" Sorry, a bit slower than a lot of you here in this room would have been. Sure enough, looked around the car, not my car. Get out of this car, into the silver Peugeot in front of me. This car was also silver. Started up, took off. Now, the funny thing was, when I got into the first car, someone pulled up to take my parking space. So can you imagine, I'm dressed in my suit in Cornwall with my Ta Moko, them watching all of this happening. Can you imagine the conversation at the police station? Were there any distinguishing features? If we were in New Zealand, they would have said, yes, he was Maori and he was wearing a suit. So our appearance as leaders is very important, and we only get one chance to make a first impression. One chance to make a first impression. So do you look like the leader? In fact, someone said to us, "Oh, you're wearing a tie?" Mark said to me, "You're wearing a tie? Do you think I should wear a tie?" I said, No. I don't think anyone in Google will be wearing a tie. I said, however, it's just a part of my presenting and my branding that I wear a tie. I said, but from what I've read about you guys, you are just so busy pushing scooters around and doing all the thinking while you're playing ping pong and all the other things that, wow, why would you sweat with a tie on? So do you look like a leader? 1987, I want to finish with looking at purpose. And 1987 was an important year in my life. I was sitting on a hotel bed in a very nice hotel. And as I'm sitting on this hotel bed, I'm having a conversation that goes something like this. I have made it. I have achieved every goal that I wanted to achieve by the time I was 30, and here I am, 26 years of age. So what were my 5 main goals? The first goal was we had lots of money in the bank for our first house, had a, my first degree under my belt, my business degree. 2 goals were we had a house, 3 goals were we had a car, 4 goals were we had a beautiful wife, even more beautiful car. Someone asked me what their car was actually one time. And here I am in a high-flying job, in a high-flying career with a multinational oil company. Life could not be any better. In fact, I'm eating an egg burger because I'm sick of the restaurant food downstairs that I've had to eat for the last 3 days, and I'm at yet another leadership training course. Just 9 short months later, I'm unemployed. I've had to sell the beautiful car. We have no money in the bank, and we are waiting for friends who used to bring us food parcels. So how did I go from a high-flying job to being unemployed? From sick of the best food this world has to offer to waiting for food parcels. No money in the bank, unemployed, sitting, learning the Maori language. I found myself in a setting very similar to this, where a speaker was talking and he said, we find it very hard to find Maori leaders who will help us with the street kids in the city of Auckland, which is our biggest city. And he said this is why. Most of them get educated, end up in high-flying jobs. They have flash houses, flash cars, very beautiful houses, very beautiful cars, and most of them end up marrying non-Maori women. This is a picture of my wife. You can see the real thing, which is a lot better at the back later. And it's a real privilege to be here with my wife and family. This is a picture of my wife, who obviously is not Māori. And as this gentleman was saying that, he said, my boys call them Mallow Puffs, which is a biscuit that we have back home that's a chocolate biscuit on the outside and white on the inside. And he said, and all they do in the end is they turn their backs on their own people. And as he turned around, people started laughing and I started crying. I was sitting in the front seat. And I started crying and I wept and wept and wept. And I just could not stop weeping. And after what seemed ages, he carried on talking and I just couldn't stop weeping. And I had to get up out of my seat and go to another part of the hall, and my wife followed me. And she said, Ngahi, are you all right? And I said, no, I'm not. I said, I don't know who I am. The goals that I had, that I wanted to achieve by the time I was 30, have made me turn my back on my people. So what did that look like? It meant going to university for a business degree and passing papers in my language just to pass papers, not actually to learn the language. And 6 months later, not even knowing my own language. It meant my friend and my flatmate had a Māori group of guys that would used to come around our house into our flat and visit us. And I used to go into my bedroom and pretend I was studying because I didn't want to know these guys. I'd become such an arrogant sod in the middle of all of this career that one day a Māori guy came up to me and he said, Kia ora, bro, have you got any loose change? I said, man, I'm not your bro. I don't even know who you are. And he looked at me and he goes, whatever, and turned around and walked off. It meant I didn't even know my own customs and aspects of my own culture, and I had turned my back on my culture. And so I found myself in a situation where my wife said to me, what would you like to do? I said, it needs to start with learning my own language. I need to know what it means to be Māori, and I'd like to take a year off to learn the Māori language. And so we both voluntarily took a year of being unemployed and learning the Māori language. And people have said, well, what's happened since then? Let me share a couple of things about my beautiful wife. We've been married 24 years, 25 years this year, December the 1st. After the 1 year of being unemployed, she went to university and became the first person in her family, to our known knowledge, to receive a bachelor's in arts, a degree from a university. She did her degree in Management Information Systems and Maori Studies. One day she came back and she said, "Ngahi, when our children are born, I'd like us to only speak Maori to them." So before our children were born, we made a decision to only speak Maori. They now attend a school, as I said earlier, where Maori is their first language of instruction, and Google has helped them to search computers in their official language. A language that 1 generation ago, my parents were punished for speaking in schools and were not allowed to speak. And so in 1 generation, we've changed from a people who were not allowed to speak our own language to another generation who now Google on a computer in their own language. And I hope that emphasizes the importance of what you have done for our language. And I thank you again. People have said, "What about you, Ngahi?" "Oh, my wife is fluent in Māori." My wife is fluent in Māori. And she's been adopted by my tribe. And one of the discussions that took place was with someone from our tribe saying, "When are you going to receive your mark of leadership?" And if my Pākehā wife, a Pākehā is a word that we use for non-Māori in New Zealand, if my Pākehā wife can take some of the principles that I've shared with you today about Proverbs, people, and purpose to walk in my world, then I know that you are more than able to walk in your world. People have said, "What about you, Ngahi?" Obviously, I changed my goals to one day receive my mark of leadership, my gift from my ancestors, my Ta Moko. And I've shifted from a hotel room bed to a room full of unemployed people to standing here with you today. And I've had the privilege of speaking in many places around the planet about my message of leadership. And I'd like to emphasize that challenge to you by saying and challenging you, who might you have turned your back on? And what will you do different tomorrow as a result of some of the things that I've been able to share with you today? Through Proverbs and people, we establish our purpose. And I would now like to invite my son to join me on the stage. And we would like to issue you a challenge from our people in New Zealand, which is called a haka. To emphasize the things that I have challenged you about your leadership today. Do you look like a leader? Do you think like a leader? What proverbs do you use? It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Kia kaha, kia maya, kia manawanui. Be strong, be courageous, be steadfast. And who might you have turned your back on, and what will you do different tomorrow? Karita, karita, kamo, hey, ringa fia. Ma Chalawa, Chalawa, Kalavakariki, Kalavakariki, Chakuama, Kia Piri, Chakuama, Kia Tata, Karakam, Kirungaki, Pai Pai, Poto, Ho, my Tafite. From New Zealand, we thank you once. Tēnā koutou. We are honoured to be here at Google. We thank you twice, tēnā koutou. We thank you 3 times, tēnā koe Erika. Tēnā no koutou katoa. Yeah, stay. We, just as the gentleman is moving to the mic, we unfortunately sold out of books, and it was a huge print run. I think it was about 300. And we, during this trip, are getting more books printed, and we're only able to bring the last 10 books to Google, unfortunately. But would like to gift those 10 books to your company, and we thank you immensely for hosting us here. Erika, can't thank you enough.
First of all, thank you for speaking today. And my question is, I love to travel, and when I travel, I really enjoy seeing rituals from Indigenous people. And I've been to New Zealand twice and really enjoyed it. When I was there, I went to, and I'm probably going to mispronounce this, Ngahi?
Ngahi, yes.
And the Maoris who performed some dancing and whatnot were different from many of the other Indigenous groups that I've seen in other places in the world because they meant it. When they did what they did, they weren't standing there doing it for tourists. They meant it. It was clear. And my question for you is, and it was beautiful. They stood out from many other peoples that I've seen. My question is, why do you think that the Maori have been able to hold on to their culture that strongly, and what might other Indigenous cultures learn from you in that regard?
Thank you, Phil. Good question. We, a part of our survival, if you want, and a part of our business acumen has been the expertise that we bring in the area of tourism. And I think there are 2 areas that contribute to us retaining our what we call performing arts. One is the emphasis of a culture that was never written down. It wasn't until we had people come from England that our language, etc., was actually written. Our language was an oral language that was passed down through the generations. And even the challenge that my son and I did then is a challenge from our tribe that has been passed down through many generations and has retained a lot of our historical knowledge. So that was the first thing. The retention of our knowledge through our performing arts has always been a very important part of our culture. The second one, obviously, is around tourism. And we thought, well, we are a very unique culture from what we consider a very unique and beautiful place. And we were able to turn what had been historical knowledge into tourism activity. And so we were not only able to perform our challenges and our waiata, our songs, but we were also able to take that Indigenous knowledge and invite people to some of our very sacred places. And so tourism, as you said, has always been a part of who we are. And an important part of our culture is hospitality. An important part of our culture is being able to look after the safety and look after the well-being of our guests. And tourism fitted that as well. Now, you mentioned hangi, Phil. It's important that when you are talking about our language and use words like hangi, that you don't get them confused with words like hongi. Now, a hongi is where I will greet you and I will press noses with you. Actually, do you remember doing that? I would like to demonstrate the hongi. The hongi is where we press noses twice. Thank you. Kia ora. Now, we press noses with you once to acknowledge you and twice to acknowledge your ancestors. The pressing of the noses, known as the hongi, allows us to both share a breath of life together as we meet. And it's a protocol that we use when we meet and also when we leave someone. So that's the hongi. So the hongi is where we meet you or greet you, and the hangi is where we eat you and cook you. You'll be pleased to know that we no longer do that. That there are other forms of meat that have been provided that run around in paddocks, and that's called the hangi, but it's actually a method of cooking food where it's prepared under the ground. The ground is covered up with stones that are heating the rocks, heating the food, and it takes about 3 or 4 hours to cook before we eat it. So it has a unique taste, doesn't it, Phil? Yes. Yeah. So did that answer your question? So it's a retention of our knowledge, our Indigenous knowledge, and it's also the ability to be business people. We have, in New Zealand, Māori people have some of the biggest tourism attractions in New Zealand, from whale watching all the way through to entertaining like we've seen here tonight, where you will have a hangi and performances as well. And especially in Rotorua, the city that I come from, where it's known as the Māori cultural capital of New Zealand. We also have some of the biggest education institutes in New Zealand. And for example, the biggest tertiary institute is Māori. We have scholarships for our young people, and a lot of our tribes are receiving millions of dollars from the Crown in order for us to develop our capacity in many areas throughout New Zealand as well. Other questions? Sorry, I promise not to answer questions so long.
Thank you again for coming, and it's very nice to meet you and listen. I was just reading through some of the introduction, and you were talking about your last name Bidois and saying French ancestry and raised Catholic, not knowing much about the Maori tribe and religion. Was there a conflict there? Is there a similarity between with other Maori tribes where there's that where there's Catholicism or other types of religion blended? I'm just very curious.
Sure. And so your question is around what sort of religion we have as Māori people?
Is there is there a correlation to perhaps a different way of having faith or having belief? Since you talk, at least you just bring it up in the book, coming from a primarily Catholic in the beginning.
Yes, as a people, we are very spiritual. I'll put it as spiritual. As a people, we are very spiritual people. And we, for example, a part of the colonization process, if you want, the people coming from England, was the first book that was ever written in our language was the Bible. And the Bible was written by missionaries who came and were, I guess, obviously a part of the religious beliefs that were brought to our country. As a people, we are very spiritual, and you will find many of our Māori people distributed amongst the many religions that are in New Zealand. For example, we have Catholics, Presbyterians, Anglicans, and we also have more of the newer forms of Christianity, born-again Christians, etc. And we also had our own prophets, people who had spiritual experiences and were healers, people like William Wiremu Ratana, who had followers and has today known as a Ratana Church because of the things that he was able to do and the people that he healed and the gifts that he presented to people in the spiritual sense. And so today you'll find quite a wide range of Maori involved in the various religions as such. However, we also have a very strong spiritual connection with our Indigenous knowledge. And our Indigenous knowledge has within it our own beliefs and our own creation and our own guardians, our own, we would call him a supreme being, our own supreme being, known as Io Matua Kore, the fatherless one, and many other names. We would also have guardians at a lower spiritual plane who are guardians over areas and, for example, creation, which has helped us hugely with our environmental protocols and the way that we look after our environment. So spirituality is a very strong part of who we are as Māori. And like I said, there's a wide range of people that you will find, Māori people in different beliefs. Other questions?
Well, thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica.
Thank you.